Today from the global lane, the Ayatollah, Islam, and war. Iranians get closer to the breaking point. Is change coming?
The people of Iran don't want this regime. Democratic change in Iran is not only inevitable, but also can be achieved in the short future.
Iranians reject theocracy, leave Islam, and find Christ.
Jesus is revealing himself. Christian radio broadcasts, Christian television broadcasts, Christian internet ministries are feeding into that hunger in Iran, and we're seeing this massive wave of people come to Christ.
On the home front, American college students prepare to return to campus. But what are they returning to? Protests and leftist thinking?
We're teaching them to be ideologues and radical activists, and we see the results. The students are incapable of actually integrating into the workforce, and they're going to be a problem.
And it's 14 years of hard labor for this Orthodox priest for defying Putin in Ukraine. And it's all right here on the global lane. Avoiding a bigger war in the Middle East. The United States is warning Iran against escalating the conflict with Israel. Has U.S. Middle East policy led to this moment? And what approach is more likely to help cooler heads prevail? Well, joining us is Dr. Majid Sadeghpour. He's Iranian American human rights activist and political director of the Organization of Iranian American Communities. Dr. Sadeghpour, it's good to have you with us. Iran's blaming the United States. They call us the Great Satan, of course, for supporting Israel in its war with Hamas. Iran claims that Israel would never have taken that risk of assassinating Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh if the U.S. hadn't provided the IDF with weapons. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the regime in Iran has been at war with humanity since its inception. Let me get back to the very early part of the 1980s when the regime in Iran began persecution of the Iranian people and essentially waged war on the people of Iran that has continued to this day. The carnage that you see outside of Iran, particularly in the Middle East at the moment, is really part and parcel of two things. One, a strategic framework built by the regime in Iran because it knew it had no legitimacy within the country. It didn't have the support of its people. And so it created a framework outside of Iran through creation of terrorist organizations and proxies across the region so that it could essentially handcuff foreign policy of Western nations. A second thing is that, as you mentioned in your intro, the global community, Western nations, have bought into the process as if the regime in Iran is reformable. So our Western decision-making has been aimed at changing the Ayatollah's behavior to what we consider powerful and moderate.
Why have we failed to challenge them?
Excellent. Well, the first strategic framework the regime is built, meaning blackmailing the free world by terrorism, has worked. It has really created a significant amount of hesitation for the free world to confront Iran.
And now with nuclear weapons, right?
That is correct. But the fundamental reason is that we have not, as of right now, as the U.S. policy has not accepted the framework that the people of Iran don't want this regime. In other words, on the one, there is a contrast between what the international community thinks is happening inside Iran, whereas what the people of Iran are telling us is happening. In other words, the people of Iran have been dying at the highest per capita execution rate in the world. I just used last year's number, 2023. Iran executed north of 850 people publicly, in other words, acknowledged executions. That is 74% of all global executions that were carried out. But Iran only has 1% of the global population. That speaks to a population that is trying to overthrow the regime, but it's got an enormous headwind. The headwind is the international community continuing to engage the regime. Yes, there is also a headwind of the regime killing and persecuting the Iranian people. But if you remove that, if we remove the first one, which is the international community finally making the decision to say goodbye to this regime diplomatically, to actually put pressure on the regime that matters, to hold its leaders accountable for rights violations and terrorism, truly hold them accountable.
Well, do you see that happening in the future here? We've got an election coming up in the U.S., so who would do a better job of responding to Iran and managing American policy on the Middle East, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, and why?
I don't know the answer to that fully. I would have to say, I do know that whoever is in the White House has no choice but to make sure that they hold Iran accountable for its behavior, both inside and outside of it. I must add one thing. One of the reasons the free world, and certainly the United States, has not pursued a policy of democratic regime change. What I meant by that is that relying on the Iranian people to make that change is that we don't think there is an alternative. But there is an alternative, to use former Vice President Mike Pence's words specifically. There is an organized opposition inside and outside, led by the National Council of Resistance in Iran, with a didactic, clearly specified plan for the future of Iran. Should we remove our perpetual engagement with the regime and pressure the regime, as we should, and express political and moral support for the Iranian people's right to overthrow this regime, and give that the political legitimacy it deserves, democratic change in Iran is not only inevitable, but also can be achieved in the short future.
Well, we'll see if there's a policy change. Dr. Majid Sadeghpour, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. We appreciate it.
Of course.